Warning: contains somewhat mature content, including language, brief violence, and mild sexual themes, and may not be suitable for people under age 14.
They appeared in front of a large white stone house. It looked ancient and vacant, with strange gray vines crawling up the walls. The vines looked cracked and eroded away, as if they too were made from stone. Reitan led Cho to the door and walked inside without knocking. There was nothing inside except some weak stone stairs, which they climbed up. They came to another door that Reitan opened and went inside. They were in a very plain room now. There were no decorations, no lights, nothing but white stone walls, floor, and simple square cutouts in the wall, which were acting as windows. In the middle of the room was a long stone table. Upon the table lay a person, who had its back to them. Cho stared at this person as it sat up slowly and stood on the floor. It walked around the table and stood facing them, leaning against the edge of the table.
"Cho, this is my friend, Kane," said Reitan. "He will be watching you while I'm gone."
Cho stared at Kane, unable to take her eyes off him. Kane stood at least 6 feet tall, but was hunched over slightly. He looked very frail and weak, his skin as white as his stone house, and sunken eyes a bright ice blue, with pupils like a cat's. He was wearing a thin, loose kimono, and his long, untidy black hair fell into his eyes and over his shoulders. He looked very feminine. In fact, the only way Cho could tell he was male was the fact that the kimono was exposing his bare chest. Cho could see Kane's ribcage beneath the unhealthy white skin. Kane slowly walked over to them. Each step looked as though it cost him a great deal of energy, and his breathing was raspy. He looked down at Reitan.
"I wish you luck, old friend,"
he said, voice hoarse and emotionless. Cho looked up at Reitan, who nodded his head and let go of her hand.
"If I'm not back in an hour," he said to Kane, "hide her from him."
Kane nodded, gently putting a bony white arm around Cho. Reitan left the room, closing the door behind him. Kane led Cho over to a corner of the room and sat down, gesturing for her to sit as well. When she did, she found Kane staring deep into her eyes.
"You have been troubled numerous times in your life,"
he said after a while. Cho blinked.
"Yes. You were wrong, though, about escaping your troubles by moving to Tokyo. You have found yourself within some new trouble."
"How did you—" Cho was about to ask, but Kane lifted a hand to silence her.
"My ability,"
he said,
"as a demon, is being able to learn about someone's past and future by looking into their eyes."
Cho furrowed her brow. "You're a demon? You look completely human. Well, except your eyes and skin." Kane nodded.
"I am half demon,"
he said.
"My mother was a full-blooded demon who went to fool around in the human world. She got pregnant with me and returned to the underworld to give birth to me. Unfortunately,"
Kane sighed, looking down to the floor,
"a child who is born half human, half demon is basically cursed for life. We half-breeds are forced to be sick, weak, frail, and practically worthless for all eternity."
"But," said Cho, "isn't there some kind of demon doctor who can help you?"
"No,"
said Kane.
"There is no cure for the half-breed sickness. For most of my life, I tried to pretend I wasn't ill. I went to the training academy to become part of His Majesty's army. That's where I met Reitan, a mere human. Of course, the employees of the academy recognized my condition and kicked me out."
Cho frowned. "That's stupid. You can predict the future. Isn't that useful?" she asked.
"Not on the battlefield,"
replied Kane.
"They want someone who is skilled physically, not mentally. They also don't want a demon that has natural human emotions."
"But then why did they accept Reitan?" Cho asked. "He is human." Kane nodded.
"Reitan was able to pull off pure hatred for other humans because of his past,"
he said.
"Only recently has he shown his true emotions. That is making His Majesty quite frightened."
Cho blinked. "True emotions? Why?" Kane lifted a finger and touched it gently to her nose.
"You,"
he said. "Me? Why me?" she asked, astonished.
With another human around, he can't help but let his human emotions slip out. Not only that,
Kane smiled very weakly.
he admires you.
Cho's eyes widened. What? Admires me? She shook her head quickly. No, you mean to say that he likes me? Kane nodded.
You do not see it?
Kane asked.
He is saving your life, and even attempts to save other humans' lives for your happiness. He even tries to be romantic with you, but you shove him away.
Cho frowned. He's just a pervert, she said. I'm sure he's only doing this saving thing in order to get what he wants from me. Kane laughed weakly, then covered his mouth and began coughing. Once he regained himself, he stared at her.
I have known Reitanna for many years,
he said.
In no way is he shallow. He seems perverted to you because he thinks that, in order to win you over, he must show you how romantic he can be. He is wrong, of course, but he will find that out for himself.
Cho stared at the floor, her eyes full of sadness. Kane put a finger on her chin and lifted her gaze back to him.
I know why you don't want him to touch you,
he said, and Cho's eyes widened.
but perhaps you should be a little more lenient.
But Kane, said Cho, I hate him. He took me away from my friend and my world. Kane nodded slowly.
Yes, but now he's trying to make it right.
He stared deep into her eyes again, then gave another frail smile.
I can see what is going to happen in your future,
he said.
I can see the outcome of this conversation he is having with His Majesty. Reitanna will come back here, alive, but very angry. However, everything will turn out all right, and, in the end, you will be happy.
Cho blinked. What's going to happen? Is Drakus going to say yes to Reitanna's request? Kane shook his head.
His Majesty will say no,
said Kane. Cho frowned. Why didn't you tell Reitanna about that? asked Cho.
I will not tell anyone their future. I believe that it's better for the individual to find out on their own,
Kane replied. Cho sighed. So, you're not going to tell me what's going to happen then? She asked sadly, and Kane shook his head.
I can only tell you that everything will be all right,
he said. He watched her for a moment, then added,
Now, about Reitanna.
Cho watched him curiously.
I do not think it is right to allow him to touch you like he has been doing, but perhaps you should let him touch you just a little bit.
What do you mean? asked Cho. I don't feel comfortable. What should I let him do? Kane stared at her.
I will show you,
he said. He came closer to her, and Cho kept very still, a bit frightened. Kane lifted his bony hand and placed it on her neck, just simply caressing her skin with his fingertips. Cho shivered.
Don't be scared. This is only a demonstration,
Kane muttered. He placed his cold lips to the corner of Cho's mouth, giving her small, gentle kisses. Cho closed her eyes, finding that she actually liked it. Kane moved his hand to caress her cheek for a few seconds, then pulled away. Cho opened her eyes and stared at him. That's it? She asked, somewhat disappointed. Kane laughed, then ended up coughing again.
Well,
he said hoarsely.
If you feel comfortable, you could also allow him to place his hand on your ribcage, but I would not call it appropriate for him to touch you in any other places besides that, your neck, head, and arms. Understand?
Cho smiled and nodded. You don't think he'll get carried away if I let him do that? She asked.
People want to do things they aren't allowed to do,
said Kane.
Right now, you aren't allowing him to touch you at all, but if you let down some boundaries, he'll respect you because his need to caress you has been fulfilled.
Kane smiled weakly and opened his arms wide, inviting her to rest against him. Cho inched closer to him and snuggled into his thin, bony chest, and he put his arms around her. I like talking to you, said Cho. I feel like you understand me.
I do understand you,
said Kane.
One gift I get from knowing your past. I know what bothers you, and I know what soothes you.
I feel like you're a close friend of mine now, said Cho quietly.
Of course,
said Kane just as quietly.
Any friend of Reitan's is a friend of mine. But
He sighed.
Reitan isn't going to be happy with me when he walks through that door.
Cho blinked. Why? She asked, but Kane shook his head.
You'll know soon enough.
Cho sighed and closed her eyes, falling into a very light sleep. About a half an hour went by and Cho was jerked awake by a shout. "What the hell is going on?" boomed Reitan's voice. Cho opened her eyes and looked to see him standing in the doorway, looking furious. Cho looked up to Kane, realizing he was still holding her.
Reitan, I realized things didn't quite go well,
he began calmly, but Reitan stormed over to them and pulled Cho out of Kane's arms. "Ouch!" Cho exclaimed, feeling pain in the arm Reitan had grabbed. Kane stood up, looking down at Reitan.
"You knew!" Reitan shouted. "You knew that Drakus was going to say no! Why didn't you tell me?"
Kane sighed.
You had to find out on your own, Reitan,
said Kane softly.
"Bull!" Reitan shouted. "You just wanted alone time with Cho, trying to win her over for yourself, huh? What did you do to her?"
He looked at Cho angrily.
"Did he hurt you?"
Cho's lip trembled and she shook her head.
Reitan, get a hold of yourself,
said Kane. Cho swallowed nervously. It wasn't what it looked like. He was just comforting me, she said. Reitan growled and dragged Cho to the door. He looked back at Kane.
"You really did it this time," he said angrily. "See if I ever ask for your help again."
He slammed the door behind him and roughly led Cho down the stairs and outside again. "Reitan," Cho began, but he squeezed her arm and the pain shut her up. Reitan opened a portal and transported back to his room. He threw Cho onto the bed and she held her bruised arm, tears in her eyes.
"Tell me what really happened!"
he shouted, pacing the room angrily. Cho sobbed gently. "Nothing. We were just talking." She sat up, wincing.
"Liar!"
Reitan bellowed at her.
"Something happened, and I want to know what it was!"
Cho cowered slightly, sobbing a bit more. "He just told me that everything was going to be all right, and gave me advice. That's all." Cho sobbed hard, curling into a ball. Reitan's glare turned into guilt, and he stared at the floor. He came over to her and hugged her.
I'm sorry,
he said softly.
I'm just angry.
Cho looked up at him. "Really? I couldn't tell!" she shot at him. Reitan sighed and stood up. He kept his back to her and pulled his shirt off. Cho stared at his back, seeing 3 huge red scars on it, surrounded by dried blood. "Reitan, what happened?" Reitan threw his shirt to the floor and turned to her.
"I pleaded with him, asked him to save the humans who are like you and me," he said. "But he said I was a fool, and his guards came in, held me to the floor with my shirt over my head, and Drakus had them carve into my back with their spears. He said the next time I do something so foolish, he'd kill me."
He went over to sit next to Cho.
Of course, a few seconds later, the wounds healed and turned into scars. Having demon powers has its advantages.
"Reitan, I'm so sorry," said Cho. "I didn't want this to happen." Reitan shook his head.
It's good he spared me because I have another plan.
He smiled menacingly, and Cho shrank down slightly from fear.
There is one demon in this world that is more powerful than Drakus. For years, Drakus has been trying to track him down and kill him, for he is afraid that this demon will try to kill him and take over the throne.
Cho blinked, looking up at him. "So, what is your plan?" she asked.
"We are going to find him," said Reitan, "and get him on our side. We'll ask him to transfer some of his power to you, and have him train you and I, as well as my army. When the time comes for the invasion, we'll go and destroy Drakus ourselves, taking the throne and halting the invasion of the human world."
He smiled at Cho, but this time the smile was gentle and caring. "You realize that you're risking your life again," said Cho, brow furrowed. Reitan nodded. "Why?"
"Because you want this," he replied. "Saving those innocent humans will make you happy, will it not?"
Cho stared at him, then looked away and nodded. Reitan gently pressed his lips to her temple and she froze.
"Then I am willing to risk my life for that."